Your sensors are correct. Do not adjust your heading. You've discovered the Omega Particle, streaming to the Alpha Quadrant and beyond. Here's your host, the anchorman of the Federation, the Doctor of Dilithium. This is Jonathan Wiegand.
Welcome to the Omega Particle Podcast. I am your gracious and honored host, Jonathan Wiegand. Glad to be back behind the golden OPP microphone. It's OPP, you know me. And after I guess it was a good hiatus, I feel like all of 2025 was kind of like the sabbatical in the podcasting world to release an episode so new in the new year. I was like, I need to kind of make this a priority again. I have the time. And there's a lot of things happening in the world of Star Trek that I've really wanted to comment on, just like let it set a little bit. And I'm going to kick off the new year. Happy 2026 with everybody. With this kind of, hopefully it won't be a controversial episode, but it is an episode that has been on my heart and mind for a while. And I'm sure if you saw the title is Star Trek dead? And just to be upfront and clear, this isn't going to be a rage bait type of episode where I'm fishing for clicks and interactions and arguments in the comments. This is strictly about, hey, like Star Trek feels different than when I grew up, than what I remember Star Trek being on the TV. And it's just different. And I just kind of wanted to talk about that and talk about that process and what I've seen. And again, if you like the new Star Trek, great. If you hate it, great. I don't care. This isn't going to be like pooping on any of them. For the record, I did love Lower Decks immensely. I love Lower Decks. Some of the other shows, maybe not so much, but to each his own. That's completely fine. Either way, it's good to be back. Excited for 2026. It's been a wild ride to get here through 2025, but in a good way, not in a bad way. And I hope that I can say the same for you guys listening, wherever you are all over the world. Hopefully you've had a great 2025 and going to have an even better 2026. But yeah, a lot of crazy stuff going on. This whole thing started, I would say, because I saw this thing about Star Wars Land and Disney and like they're tearing down Muppet Land. I guess they already tore it down. And that made me sad because I'm a huge Muppet fan. And when we went as a family a few years ago, I was the only one in my family to ride it because no one else wanted to ride it, including like at that time, I think it was 3-year-old son. He's like, nah, I don't want to ride your Muppet ride. I just adore the Muppets. So in that, like going to Disney, you kind of join all these groups, etc., blah, blah, blah. And somebody was talking about Star Wars Land, and then one of the comments, somebody mentions Star Trek Land. And I know Paramount just went through a huge merger, which we'll talk about coming up pretty soon. But yeah, I was like, yeah, why isn't there a Star Trek Land? Why isn't there this dedicated space that all the Trekkies can go to and transport to and come in and just fail astrometrics and go to Starfleet Academy and have all this fun stuff? I would love that. And I feel like everyone around the world would too. And I mean, I'm not excluding the themed roller coaster in Germany. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like a full-fledged immersive park, what they did at Disney. To start even further back, I didn't find Star Trek, I would say. Star Trek found me. And it just kind of happened to me. It wasn't something that I was like, you know what, I'm definitely going to become this person that like loves Star Trek so much and he has model ships on his desk and he's starts a podcast because he loves it so much and just wants to talk about it. No, I never intended to be that way. I almost, like I said, fell into it. It was just always there. Growing up, it was on the channels. Even in college, I remember one time we were just, I won't say the dude's name, but it was our roommate. He was older than us. We were just watching TNG was on. And so we just flipped it on and watching like this huge binge of like 2 or 3 hours of Trek of TNG in a row. And it just kind of, that's what it was like. Even in the 90s, like growing up, it was always on syndication and you fell into it. And so I talked to people who either work or like in personal, they're a little bit older, like in their 50s or 60s, or older, and they're just like, oh yeah, I know Star Trek, because it was just always on. That's a little nugget of where we're going today. If you can tell, it was just like Gravity or commercials. It's that one channel that always played it on repeat for a whole day. And I think the BBC might still do it. I don't think this is a controversial take, because to me, this whole thing wasn't really about a theme park. It was about something deeper. And pretty much what the question that the person asked, why isn't there a Star Trek theme park? And with the heart of it to me is like, Star Trek doesn't feel quote unquote big anymore as it did, I would say, in the 90s or even the 2000, like early 2000s. It just doesn't feel that way. And of course, there's a part of me that's like immediately defensive. Like, no, it's just the new Trek people have gotten to me, and new Trek's terrible and it's all garbage. And the more I just kept realizing it's like that feeling that it's not anger, it's not bitterness, it's not even disappointment, it's grief. It's very nerdy grief, because growing up and even in college, which is like 2010s, which is like 15 years ago, geez, it was just unavoidable. Star Trek was always there. And even though technically there's more Trek on the air now, it somehow feels smaller. And we're going to get into it and why exactly. Maybe even the kind of the history of Star Trek and from always from all the way from the original series through where we are at now. And why does it feel small? And how can we fix that as a fan base? And can we fix that? Is that just the modern state of things in entertainment? Can we ever return back to those glory days of the golden age of Star Trek? This is more along the lines of a love letter with some jokes, not really a YouTube thumbnail where I'm yelling into the void and angry. This is not a rage episode. This is definitely going to be a lot of fun. So please buckle up. And Luna the intern, everybody, let's roll that beautiful bean footage. Here's something that will always seem ironic and funny to me, and that is Star Trek originally was an absolute failure. It was not creatively, I'll say, but the original series was culturally a failure. NBC literally looked at it and was like, yeah, we don't want that. It's garbage. Because it's wild, because the show contains so much. It can contain philosophical ideas, allegories about racism and war, about Russia during the Cold War, especially pushing racial and gender norms at that point, like having women on the bridge and having women of color on the bridge. It was a great, like, that's what sci-fi does. It challenges our preconceived notions and pushes us a little bit, and that's what great sci-fi is. Plus, I mean, you had this guy with a ripped shirt openly flirting with green women. So that was new in the 60s, but NBC, of course, said, hey, the ratings are soft, and they canceled it. And thankfully, Star Trek was made in the 60s, because it was made and existed in the modern era. That would have been it. End of story. It would have been gone forever, lost. Maybe there's this random cult following somewhere at some point. Probably going to be a reboot 30 years later where Kirk is super sad and has a beard. But instead, something magical happened in the 60s, something called syndication. And if you're under a certain age, syndication sounds like some type of like Victorian disease that you would get. But syndication was absolute chaos, because even though it was canceled, TV shows still ran. Sometimes daily, sometimes weekly. It just really depended on what the local news stations would buy and fill up time with. And you would get, I know, for example, growing up, we would get Simpsons would come on between 4 and 5:30. So coming home from school, it's like, oh, I got at least an hour and a half of The Simpsons coming on. And you didn't have to love it. You didn't have to choose it. You didn't even know when it was coming on. It just, or what episode it was. It was just, you just turned on the TV and it was there. And that's the beauty of syndication. And sometimes the episodes were in order. Sometimes they're wildly out of order. I remember one time there was the same episode twice in 1 week, and it really pissed me off. But going back to Star Trek, what this did in the 60s and the 70s is it did something incredibly important. It normalized Star Trek, and it grew the fan base. And it felt like it belonged. It felt like it was there, and it was become right into the zeitgeist of the American psyche. And you have to remember there was a time when science fiction on television was super rare. It's not like it is now where you have this prestige sci-fi series where a sad man stares at a glowing wall for 8 episodes, or you get the wild Black Mirror episodes involves leaders and pigs and bikes and game shows and all this kind of wild stuff. But back then, Star Trek was it. It was the thing. It didn't have to compete with superheroes or cinematic universes or space operas. It pretty much stood alone on television. And that means even if you don't love it, you remembered it. The music stuck, the colors stuck, the ideas stuck, because it was on constantly. Like I said, it found you back in the 60s. Syndication, it would find you. Even to the point I remember in high school making fun of one of my friends because he said he likes Star Trek and it's always on. And I made fun of him for being a nerd, like Star Trek and phasers and shit. I was like, well, look who's laughing now. If you listen to the show, you know who you are. My bad about that, but he's a very good friend, so we were just joshing. Either way, you always you absorb Star Trek in a way before you ever quote-unquote chose it. It was in the psyche. Everybody knew who Picard was. Everybody knew who Kirk, going specifically to the 60s. You knew who Kirk was. And then we get into something called the movie era. And that's like the late 70s into the early 80s, and the motion picture happens. Which, let's be honest, it's less than a movie and more like a $40 million screensaver. It just wasn't... the first one is not good. And it just proves something crucial to me, that people still cared about Star Trek after being off the air for so long. Syndication built this into a following. And then, the Wrath of Khan drops, and it suddenly, Star Trek isn't just this irrelevant, wild show with crazy singing in the intro and stuff. It's emotionally devastating. I mean, they killed Spock. And we all quote Wrath of Khan forever. It, to me, saved the series, because if you have another dud after the motion picture and Star Trek 2 is just an absolute poop show, I feel like that would kill the franchise at that point. So the fact that it does the exact opposite, it gives it... Some people consider Wrath of Khan the best Star Trek movie ever made. It launched it into the stratosphere. And then Hollywood realizes, oh my gosh, this is a thing. You can have a deep, emotional stories with sci-fi. It's not this weird old show with Ponfar, the wildness of swashbuckling without your shirt on. Like, it's actually a franchise. So that we have the movie era, which is great. And it really puts Star Trek at the forefront. There's no TV show on at this point. And again, if you're just a big Star Trek fan, you all know this, but it's fun, and it's getting to my ultimate point. And then comes 1987. And to me, 1987 that's the point that Star Trek jumps the ship. It jumps the shark. It jumps the broom from being this old man's game, I would say. Because if you were a kid in the 60s, add on 30 years in the late 80s, 20, 30, yeah. Okay, it's not really relevant to maybe kids, teenagers or whomever. You're like, I'm not watching an old crappy show like that's always on late at night or something. No, now we have the Next Generation. And to be honest, when the Next Generation premiered, it was rough. Like, they did not think the show was going to survive. Because, well, long story short, we have an episode about this called Behind the Drama, behind the scenes in the drama of like TNG, and it talks about how like Roddenberry wanted this so futuristic persona and just this environment where no one had any disagreements at all on the bridge or in the ship, and that it all had to be external, going against this internal force. And the writers hated it. I mean, writers would throw scripts out the window, second, third story windows, because they just got in such a hassle with Roddenberry. And then eventually he relented, and then the showrunners changed. That's why if you ever watch TNG, the seasons 1 and 2 and 3 are so drastically different in quality and in writing, because they didn't have to deal with that from Roddenberry anymore. And there's so much like with Gates McFadden and her getting fired, and then them rallying, and the cast kind of like realizing, trying to become more of a family unit. It's really great and really wild, the first 3 seasons of The Next Generation. Famously, season 1 was Patrick Stewart saying to the crew, we're not here to have fun. We're here to work, and we're here to do it serious. And that's, the Royal Shakespearean actor coming out in him, and that's his background. So I understand going to sci-fi, but that's the difference between now and then, is that they didn't cancel TNG either. They let it grow. They let it be weird, and they let it fail, and they let it improve. And then something insane happens. Star Trek becomes constant. And with the success of TNG in those first season 3, 4, 5, and it goes all the way up to 7, it becomes this institution again in sci-fi and in the zeitgeist in the American psyche. From 1987 to 2005, 18 straight years, Star Trek never leaves television. That is absolutely crazy. That's not a run. That's a lifestyle, honey. And the seasons weren't short either. They were 26 season episodes. And then you had sometimes in the Golden Age, you had 3 shows on at the same time. You have TNG, you have Voyager, you have Deep Space Nine. And it was a lot. And it was great. And then, of course, we have Enterprise, we had Faith of the Heart. And compare that to now, which we just finished Stranger Things yesterday. And I was just thinking, I was like, in 2016 when it came out, I remember watching it around Halloween in 2016. That was 5 seasons. And it took 9 years for that long, to the point where the kids freaking grew up. So to put that in perspective, so you have 9 years of Stranger Things. Can anybody guess how many episodes they had over 9 years? Luna, the intern, anybody? Nobody? 42. There's 42 episodes in total. Now, granted, those episodes are super long, and some of them are 2 hours, 2+ hours long. But that's the difference between today and back then. For 18 straight years, we had the ability to, and the time to go over high concept philosophy, to do the dumb Ferengi episodes, and where they kidnap, Loxana Troy, and they try to use her for negotiations, or the ghost candle episode. You get all these stupid, or the Voyager with I don't forget the name, the ones with where they turn into salamanders, because it's just, we don't have that anymore. Or you get whole side characters that you had no idea about, and then suddenly you love and you have this emotional connection to, and you have entire episodes about guilt and about a specific emotion about this certain character, and you get these characters time to be boring, and you're there with them, just like in any other relationship. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes you don't do much. Sometimes you just kind of like shoot the crap and you just go about your daily life. And I always say that about even with other franchises like Harry Potter. If there was a Harry Potter book that was 3,000 pages long and it just covered the daily life of, a student, and it just was like, I would read that like crazy. Or you could translate that to any other franchise you love, Lord of the Rings, whatever it is, I would read that like crazy, because it's just, when you love those characters and you love that kind of realm, I would say, or universe, it's just like, yeah, you'll soak up the daily, the boring stuff. And in today, and before I get into that, I think secretly that's why it works. That's why those are our comfort shows we go back to now. I mean, does anybody have a modern comfort show? Okay, excluding like my wife, who her comfort show is One Punch Man, which is an anime. But yeah, you don't really hear people like, yeah, you know what? Stranger Things is my comfort show I watch when I'm trying to fall asleep, or anything really out there that's kind of wild, or like Suits is my comfort show. Like, nobody says that. Okay, I'm writing my comment right now that Suits is my comfort show, and I love Beck and Mark. To put in perspective, 9 years, you get 42 episodes. From 1987 to 2005, you get 624 episodes. 624. So with that much Star Trek, again, you age with it. You watch it as a kid, as a teenager, and then suddenly an adult who really relates to Picard way too much. And because it was always on, it never felt like it was asking for your attention. It just existed. The question was whether you're going to dip into the pool or not if the pool was ever there. Now let's jump to today. We had the Abrams films. We have Discovery. We have Picard. We have Strange New Worlds. We have Lower Decks. We have Starfleet Academy, which I am hopeful for. I think it'll be fine. I'm not going to judge it yet. I know a lot of people are already like tanking it because it looks like Degrassi or Dawson's Creek with those promo shots they came out. But Jonathan Frakes is directing. Luna, is he directing every episode or just some? He's directing. He's just directing some of them, I think. But he said it's for serious Trek fans and it's going to build the lore and we're going to love the intricate details of it all. But even then, like, I just think it's going to be, we'll just see. I don't want to sway anybody one way or the other, but we'll see. And I'm going to be there. But that does sound like a lot, right? I mean, we've had Section 31, the movie. We've had a bunch of stuff, sure. But combined, all of that, 190 episodes over nearly 2 decades. 2005, 2025, 2026, 190 episodes. But the main difference is between today and back then, and why I think is Trek really dead or not, is before, like I just mentioned, the question wasn't, do I have to go watch Star Trek and seek it out? The question was, what am I going to slip into the pool? Am I going to dive in and watch an episode randomly? Oh, TNG's coming on. Oh, that episode? Yeah, I'll watch that. Oh, it's the episode Worf kills Martok. Of course I'm going to watch that. And now there's a subscription. For me, it's $12.99 because I don't like to watch commercials. It's now I have to have a registered account. It's a conscious decision. It's like I have to consciously sit down and watch Star Trek and watch this new episodes. And modern Trek is something you schedule. It's not something you are surprised by. Old Trek, like I said, something you trip over. And because there's so much content in the world right now, Star Trek doesn't dominate the cultural conversation like it once did in the 90s. When I was a very small kid, my mom got free movie tickets somehow. She was a paralegal, and we got free movie tickets. And it was, I think, on New Year's Day, or it was sometime in December, because I remember being Christmas stuff. And it was 101 Dalmatians, the live action, and the other movie was Star Trek. I think it was Generations. I don't remember. I should have done the research before I started this story, but it just came to me and I was like, this is too good. But I just remember all the Star Trek people there lining up, queuing up, getting ready to go in, dressed up. And I was like, man, these guys are weird. And shout out, 30 years later, I just don't feel that anymore. Even with the idea of having a new movie coming out, the first inclination is, I hope it doesn't suck. Or we get this kind of new concept, we're like, I hope it doesn't suck. Or we all clamor and bite our nails for Star Trek Legacy with 7 of 9 commanding the Enterprise. What class are we on? F now? Commanding the Enterprise F. And I'm just like, come on, give us that. That's what we want. And them not doing it. I think that's the difference, is because before it was this institution that you got to participate in as a group, and as it just was always there and it found you. Now it's a schedule. It's kind of individual. I mean, as a fan base, I feel like we're bigger, but I feel like we're also lonelier too. Not to get too deep, philosophical about everything, but I just feel like it's just not the same, and it's not worse. It's different. So Star Trek less special? I don't think so. I think what we lost, maybe some of the quality, I'll be honest, but we lost the inevitability of it all. I used to be and feel like this shared language. Now it's a chosen one, just like any other fandom. Stay on the Stranger Things kick. Just like Stranger Things. Oh, you like it? Cool. Okay, well, I like it. Well, yeah, I don't watch it. I watch this BBC show instead. It's more of not a shared common language. It's more of what random niche are you into? And that's okay, because, the fandom's alive, it's creative, it's thoughtful, it's very passionate. And if someone ever built a theme park, I would be there, standing in line, of course, with my sweet Quark shirt on. But either way, Star Trek isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It's still home. It still feels like home to me. However, I think it's just different and it's changed, and I feel like there's a grief in me because I've realized, the fandom may never have those glory days again. I hope it does, but not because of the quality is bad, glory days, but glory days because the society around us has changed. I mean, when Picard came out in season 3, it was a big deal because they're getting the gang back together and it was awesome, and that made like kind of ripples in everywhere. But at that point, then people were like, I had friends be like, do I have to watch the first 2 seasons of Picard? And I was like, no, you don't. It's not even, and that's the thing that's frustrating. It's like, no, you don't actually have to watch all that. Could you imagine with TNG, you just come in season 3, episode 1, and raw dog the first, just not even pay attention to the first 2. Think of any Star Trek show, Golden Age, original season you probably could, but like Voyager, Deep Space Nine, even Enterprise, freaking Enterprise. TNG, you come in, you just miss the first 2 seasons? No, you couldn't do that at all. You would be lost. There'd be little side jokes and quips and little random things that you have no idea about, but you feel like you're supposed to know, and you're like, I missed something here. Like you wouldn't, like my friend who watched season 3 of Picard didn't have anything like that. Didn't ask a question like, is that an inside joke? Nothing, because there was nothing there. There was nothing from the first 2 seasons that could, in my opinion, like warrant that. And so, do we have more Trek? Yeah. But it's just, there's not as much heart in it, I would say. And I'm excited, but I'm also just cautious. And like I said at the very beginning, it's kind of a nerdy grief. And I've debated myself whether to post this episode or not, because I don't want people to think I'm crapping all over if you love the new Trek or what. But to me, it's just like, is Star Trek dead? I'd be like, no, it's not, to kind of wrap up the episode. No, Star Trek isn't dead. But it's changed. It's not the same Trek, I would say. It's not the same. I don't think we're going to get a Drumhead episode ever again. Because society and corporations will not allow that type of stuff. Not to get super political, but like, you don't have time to do those type of episodes because you only get maybe 8 or 9 episodes a year, and it has to be very poignant, it has to be very plot driven, it has to be very to the point. Everything has to matter. And then sometimes you get gimmicks, like maybe doing a Muppets every Star Trek episode, or maybe doing an all musical episode. Like you get gimmicks so you can bring people in and be like, haha, like we're doing something wild and fun. But there's no, oh my gosh, that's a cultural thing that, I mean, I don't know how many people through the political landscape, whenever there's political turmoil, somebody on my feed who's not even a Star Trek fan will always post the freaking Picard speech from Drumhead about how, like, freedom, you silence one voice, it's the first chain in the shackle. And I'm like, that's because it's true. It's freaking true. And like the things that are great and that last in, whether it's entertainment and then stick with us, that last in this life, are things that go beyond, pure entertainment. They speak to us on a deeper level, philosophically, politically, whatever. And I feel like we've lost that in Trek because we're trying to be safe, get ratings. And that's what I'm kind of raging about, if anything, on this episode, is that I want us to kind of allow it to be boring again. Give us the space and the time to flesh out characters, to flesh out the Captain Protons, to flesh out the freak man, like just the Alexander episodes, that we would get on TNG, that we just don't have that anymore. It's kind of tough to watch. I'll close this with this because I can ramble forever. I will say this, 2 things. The first is that Paramount is going to licensing fees apparently going up by like 3,000%. That's a rumor on Wall Street, the things I've read. So licensing is going to get incredibly expensive. So you're probably going to see less cross-branding shows, whether it's Pluto, whether it's BBC, whether it's any of these other syndication shows. So the fact that we had some type of quote-unquote syndication on these streaming platforms probably all going to die. Because if they're raising their licensing fees up 3,000%, no one's going to be wanting to afford that. So that means, and I heard Netflix is also closing out all of Star Trek. Now in the US, we don't have freaking Trek on Netflix. What are you talking about? But as a global podcast, I'm sure a lot of the Trekkies that don't listen in the US, yeah. So they're moving Trek off of Netflix because of this licensing deal. That's what I've read. I don't know if that's true because it was a merger with Paramount, etc., and Sundance. Long story short, the syndication is really going to hit the nail on the head, number one. And then number two is that nobody, and this is my whole point, nobody falls asleep to Strange New Worlds, I don't think. Personally, like, I watch the big three, as I call them, or big four. I include Enterprise sometimes. And I usually go through my spiel and I fall asleep to them. And I've done that since freaking college. I don't think people do that with New Trek. I've tried it. It's too much. You can't relax to that. It's got to be on. So that's what in the nutshell, that's what I'm saying, is that it's no comfort shows anymore. It's all corporate throw up. Thank you so much for listening. This has been one of the most uneasy episodes I've ever made in my podcasting career. Not because of the ideas behind it, but just a little bit of vulnerability. I've never really just kind of like, hey, this is the state of the union, I guess, with Trek, and this is what I feel like, but this is where we're at, unfortunately. And I'm very excited for what's coming down the pike and the new stuff, and hopefully these new video games and all this. I am excited, don't get me wrong. I need to get that Lego set so bad. So if you know somebody at Lego, let them know. I want it, but I don't want to pay $400 for it. Oh boy. But again, thank you all so much for listening. And Luna, let's wrap it up. Again, thank you all so much for listening and coming down this ride with me as we start 2026 and kind of get out of this hiatus of a year of 2025 with podcasting. And I'm very excited. We're going to start our DS9 episode review again this week, but I can't announce what we're going to cover next episode. And this is something I literally got a text like 2 minutes before I started recording this episode. My wife is like, hey, is in 2026, is that when World War III starts in Star Trek? And I go, yes, it is. That's like the pre-eugenic wars war, if that makes any sense. And she goes, oh, interesting. You should do an episode about that. Like comparing our 2026 to the Star Trek 2026. And I was like, barn burner. She's super smart and pretty. So I was like, yes, great point, honey. I should do an episode on that. That would be coming down the pike after our DS9 review. So be on the lookout for that. Again, feel free to reach out on social media. We hit 100,000 followers on Instagram. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for doing that. We are going to be doing, hopefully by video on YouTube, you guys can finally see my face, for the Star Trek Academy, Starfleet Academy, not Star Trek, Starfleet Academy show that's debuting on, I think, January 14th, if I'm correct. So be on the lookout for that. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, exciting stuff with the OPP universe. And again, thank you all for so much for listening, coming along with it throughout the years. And remember, take care of yourselves, take care of one another. Everybody's important, they matter, and we want to see you around tomorrow. So without further ado, Luna, second star of the right, straight on till morning.